into a death game. Way to take advantage of the SEO there, guys. So now we have a rough timeline of events. Serial company sells the IP, makes a parkour park, someone dies, and the franchise becomes a murder game show. Now, here we are, part of the 57th and final season of the show. And clearly, we're meant to be something special because the game won't stop bringing it up.
No one has ever made it this far. Usually only mere seconds. If you're lucky, a minute or two.
You're the first contestant we've ever had who won. Hundreds of people last a few seconds. A few last a couple of minutes.
Although this isn't just down to our sick parkour skills. If you look in the surveillance office where we first met other Frankie, a whiteboard has written out the status of the game show contestants. Next to the contestant that's still alive, us, it says keep alive until the very end. And throughout the game, we encounter other Frankie doing exactly that, keeping us alive. When you're making your way through the water park, other Frankie stops you from going one way and lifts a shutter door for you to help your progress. When you encounter Frankie in the vents, other Frankie tells him, literally stopping him from killing us. And if you look hard enough, other Frankie can be seen hiding in the darkness of various parts of the park, watching us, ready to step in and help if we need it. Now, you might think he's just looking out for the show. With us surviving, the numbers are going way up, and that could save the show from bankruptcy. But I actually think there's a little more to it than that. Before you make it to Frosted Peaks, you can see 2 screens with the live chat of the game show. Most of it contains people betting on how long you're gonna last, or assuming the player is a bot because he's too good. But there's one comment that stood out to me. It says, Genshin Impact just released on Xbox, and they want to sponsor this video? Sorry, Frankie, no death traps for me today. I got myself a better offer. You could still have Santi though. You all know Genshin Impact at this point. It's the open world action RPG set in the magical world of Teyvat, a land that has been divided up into 7 regions, each with its own god that controls a specific elemental power. But the big news right now is that Genshin Impact is now available on Xbox. That's right, the game is fully cross-platform, baby! And if you've already gotten yourself a HoYoverse account, don't worry, because it's completely cross-compatible with your Microsoft account too. No need to start your progress from the very beginning. We all know how that feels. Plus, if you're an Xbox Game Pass member, you'll get yourself some free Primo Gems with every update, which is great because they release updates constantly. In fact, they just released version 5.2 with a bunch of new quests, new locations, and most importantly, new characters, like the 5-star hero Chaska, who can traverse the skies like you've never seen, riding her gun. Yeah, it's as weird and as dangerous as it sounds. To your enemies, that is. Maybe she could fly around the park and take out some of these mascots for me. Or if you're interested in someone that's more dark and brooding, you can always try the 4-star hero Auroron. His keen sense of perception, as well as his ability to rise high up into the air, would easily give our protagonist a run for their money. So if you'd like to jump into the world of magic and wonder that isn't filled with swords and death traps, head on down to the description right now to download the game. And if you log in with your Xbox, Genshin Impact are handing out the Wings of Fate Wind Glider for free, which is a pretty good deal to me, and I could definitely use it in this park. But alas, I've got to get back to solving the lore of this weird place. So thanks to Genshin Impact for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the trampoline park and see how Santi's doing. Oh well, at least we still have the chat message that I needed. It's the only message not in all caps, which if you've been part of any live stream, you'll know immediately means something weird is going on. But more importantly, the message says, I know it's you. Where is my brother? Unlike all the other messages, this one is aimed directly at us, the player. Our identity is also brought up again at the end of the game when you return to the title screen. On it is now a sign that says, be back soon. Underneath that text, though, is a code. Specifically, this is known as a pigpen cipher. It's a type of substitution cipher that replaces letters with shapes based on grids like this. By decoding it, we can see that it says, I know who you are. With all this attention being put on our identity, we have to be more significant to this story than just a guy who lucked out and got the VHS. But then, who are we? That vague chat message asked us where their brother was, which immediately made me think back to the 2 brothers who started Frankie's. It's the only other mention of brothers so far in this game, so it feels like like those two need to be connected, and therefore who we are must also be connected to them. But outside of that, we don't really have a whole lot to go on outside of the fact that we live in a crummy apartment, and the flashback scene doesn't last long enough for us to really dig around and explore for more clues, which means it was time for some out-of-the-box thinking. Or should I say, out-of-the-game thinking. By breaking the boundaries of the game, we can explore much more of this apartment, revealing that there's actually a whole second room filled with monitors that are connected to security cameras from Frankie's parkour palace. On one of those monitors, we see the words "Welcome Back S," as well as a piece of paper numbering the seasons of Frankie's show, with the 57th, the current season we're competing in, circled. Finally, above those numbers are the words "Everything Changes," which I'm sure it would if you were about to win $5 million, but we've actually seen this phrase once before. During the Frosted Peaks section, before you start the initial climb, you can take these stairs off to the side and find what is labeled the CEO's office. In this room, we can find a set of documents for an apartment rental that also has those same words on it. Everything changes. We are the CEO of Frankie's, and the one we read about, the one who took over the company from the original founders, was Stan Ellie. Welcome back, S. Is this why he's being kept alive? Because he's the CEO of the company? I mean, not a great look to kill your own boss. Plus, what better way to get your ratings up while also making sure you don't lose any of the money? Your CEO competes, he wins the money, puts it back into the business, and the ratings go sky high. Everything changes because the business is going to win on all fronts. Although, why would he then need to have found the VHS tape? We see stacks of cereal boxes in his apartment all labeled as if he's actively looking for this thing. But if he was the CEO, he could just enter under false pretenses. He's the boss, he can literally do whatever he wants. And also, why would he need to be monitoring everything from his home? There has to be something deeper going on here, and what that is becomes a little more clear when you check out the final item floating in the apartment. Another newspaper clipping. This time it's about how we, Stan Ellie, were accused of being involved in the murder of one of the original founders, Sean Sykes, and we were being accused by none other than Sean's brother, the other original founder, Michael. So that message about "where's my brother?" I think we found out who that came from, and who that body that was discovered under the floorboards belongs to. Because of these accusations, the company looked to take on a different venture, like say becoming a death game, and Stan decided to resign as CEO. Stan therefore couldn't have rigged the game in his favor, because he's no longer the guy in charge. He'd been shamed out of his position, accused of a horrific crime, and was left with nothing. That apartment contract from the CEO office was likely from his last day in position, finding a cheap, crummy apartment for him to move to after losing his job, because that's all he could afford. However, as we see from the apartment, he clearly had a plan. He set up monitors in his apartment connected to the CCTV of Frankie's, watching what was going on. Why? To train. We can see the number of other seasons on the monitors. He's been watching for a long time. If he wanted out of this life he was now in, he needed to win big, so he watched and learned. That's how he knew to run sideways and past Frankie at the very beginning where everyone else normally dies. He'd been planning his victory for a while, and now the show is in its last season, putting up their biggest prize ever, $5 million. This would be his last shot at winning big. He'd been preparing for this. So, as we see in the first cutscene of the game, he went out and bought hundreds of boxes of cereal to guarantee his place in the show. And on box 769, nice, he finds the elusive VHS. From here, everything changes. No longer would he be the disgraced former CEO of a tainted franchise living in a crummy apartment. He'd go back to the scene of the crime, and he'd walk away back on top once again. So I guess it's a little bit more like Poppy and FNAF than I thought. Except then I remembered something Henry Hotline said to us the second time we meet him.
We aren't going bankrupt, and this isn't our last game show. As soon as you're eliminated, 4 new cereal boxes will be sent out all around the world, sitting and waiting for its lucky contestant, just like you.
Henry says that they aren't going bankrupt. And given his head explodes right after this, almost as if he's said too much and he's therefore being got rid of, I'm kind of inclined to believe him, which means the entire pretense that this is the final season is a complete lie. But if that's the case, why do it? Was it just to boost ratings? I saw this kind of thing all the time when I was working back at places like Fox and Disney. If the show isn't getting the ratings, the network might choose to announce that this season will be its last, which can sometimes result in such a boost in the ratings that the network will then rethink their initial plans to cancel it. This happened recently with Yellowstone, which after announcing
Get off that couch and come to Old Navy for holiday styles and steals.
Have you heard? Deals are poppin'. Spread the word. Prices dropping. We've got styles that slay. So get on your way. Stop by your Old Navy store today.
the 5th season would be its last, had 16.4 million people watching that final episode, a massive increase compared to the 8.8 million at the start of the season. And since then, Paramount have appeared to soften their stance on whether they will renew for a 6th season. Frankie could be doing the same thing with their viewers, declaring bankruptcy to get more eyeballs on the show. But if the show isn't going bankrupt, it feels like a bit of an unnecessary gamble just for a few more views, especially if the news got out, like, having one of your mascots spill the beans mid-show. Unless, of course, it was never about trying to get lots of people's attention. It was about getting the attention of just one. Someone who was desperate for a big payday that could then be trapped here and forced to suffer for what they did. That's right, loyal theorists. This final season of Frankie's Death Game was all a ruse to capture and torture our player character, Stan Ellie. The writing is quite literally on the wall, with messages like, "We'll never let you go," and "no more bad behavior." Bad behavior is likely referring to the murder that Stan supposedly committed. And don't forget about the "I know who you are" Pigpen cipher left by Frankie. Whoever is behind this death game, they know who Stan is and what he did. By declaring themselves to be going bankrupt and offering a massive cash prize, this would be Stan's last chance to win. He thought he could come in, win the prize money, and bail, but that was never an option. Once he won, he was forced to stay here and keep competing. Now, I'm gonna stick my neck out a bit here, because while the game has purposefully kept who the new management of Frankie's is, based on everything we've talked about, there's only one person who would not only know everything about Stan and the murder, but would also have the motivation for this kind of elaborate revenge plot. Michael Sykes, the other co-founder of Frankie's and the brother of the late Sean Sykes. The newspaper article never mentions Stan actually being convicted of murder, just that he was accused and then resigned. Yes, he lost everything, forced to live in a decrepit apartment with barely anything to his name. But for Michael, that isn't justice. That isn't enough. Stan needed to feel pain like he did. And so, the point of declaring the bankruptcy wasn't to boost ratings, it was to capture Stan, making him think he was coming of his own volition to play in a game he thought he'd trained for, to win some much needed cash. But now, Michael has Stan exactly where he wants him, able to exact his revenge on him for what he did to his brother. He sent those chat messages of "Where is my brother?" to tease Stan, to remind Stan of what he did, and then he refuses to let Stan go after he wins at the end of the game, forced to endure this cycle of torture again and again, season after season. So there you have it, theorists. We found Frankie, his secret hiding spots, his identity, and his motivation. But did you find the 5 Freddies I hid throughout this episode? Yeah, they're definitely there. Go back and see if you can spot them, and let me know down in the comments where you think they are. Regardless, I'm very excited to see what cruel revenge plots Michael Sykes will cook up for the next season. And I'm intrigued to see how Stan Ellie is going to try and survive, and maybe whether he'll walk away with the thing he wants most, a fresh start. In the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching. Congratulations, lucky contestant! You've made it to the end of the video! Now it's time to collect your prize! Just click and you'll receive more indie horror lore about Don't Fret. Can you survive till the end, contestant?